The Wilkow Majority, non-union corporate radio at its finest.
Man, you're really taking this playing of a band who represents a state to its extreme, because Gene Simmons was born in Israel. All right, so this is going to be interesting. Joining us on the program right now is George Birnbaum. He has been a chief of staff to Benjamin Netanyahu, worked on the campaign of Ariel Sharon, worked for the Chancellor of Austria, the Prime Minister of Bulgaria, the Prime Minister of Romania, and the Prime Minister of Kosovo. And God knows how many countries have... When did you become this international political figure?
I kind of fell into it, but now over 20 countries and 5 continents, so it's been quite a ride.
Am I allowed to ask how old are you?
You sure can. I'm 47.
Okay, so that makes you a couple of years older than me, and I've been sitting here behind this microphone for 10 years, not going anywhere. I don't mean that in my career. I mean traveling internationally.
Get it.
I didn't mean that my career's not going anywhere. I mean, I have not been to any of the places that you have been, is what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, some of the places I've been, not a lot of people get to, but hopefully Israel is one of the places that everyone can get to.
Okay, so let's look at the end of the Obama years. He has a straight up disdain for the state of Israel. And tell me if I'm wrong here. I always look at the way Obama and the Democrats look at Israel the way college kids looked at victim and oppressor. He really, I think, and I'm not playing, armchair psychologist, I think he thinks that the world of the Middle East is unfair due to the existence of Israel. That Israel has an unfair advantage. It's had, an unfair situation with its military. That if we could just rein in Israel, everything would be fair. That would mean you'd have to believe that Sunni and Shia wouldn't be killing each other if it weren't for Israel, or that the governments of these Islamic countries would be more fair to its own citizens if it weren't for Israel.
Yeah, well, I think part of it is, if you look at how he looked at American exceptionalism, it's kind of the same thing, because if you look at where Israel was, or even where it wasn't prior to 1948, in fact, not even a country, and where it's come in such a short time, it truly is an exceptional story. And instead of celebrating that exceptionalism and that triumph of rebuilding a 2,000-year-old civilization that was literally destroyed and dispersed to the four corners of the earth, instead of celebrating that and defending it and understanding that Israel really is the tip of the spear in the fight against Islamic fundamentalism and the fight against the Western civilization versus the Islamic fundamentalists. Instead of celebrating that, embracing it, it was the exact opposite. It was trying to destabilize it, to undercut it. It was really a travesty. And I do think, though, there may even be another level to Obama and even maybe John Kerry than just a democratic, little d democratic view of Israel. I think there's another level there that is even hard to understand how much disdain and maybe even disgust they have for the Jewish state, which is, to me, indescribable and unexplainable.
Well, do you think it's a question of haves and have-nots, or victim and oppressor, or do you think it's something about it being the Jewish state?
I have a feeling it has to do with more being the Jewish state than victim and oppressor. I really do. When it comes to the Obama worldview, I don't necessarily think Democrats in Congress feel the same. I do think maybe they have more of that victim and oppressor kind of mentality. But I think with Obama and even with John Kerry, there was a level of disdain for the Jewish state itself, and that really, I think, we saw that towards the end of his presidency, where he really went all out and really cut the legs out from underneath Israel internationally.
It's funny that it became fashionable I think it's funny that the Clintons are now getting Air Fingers, quote, briefs on why they lost the election. I thought we settled that. It was Russian hacking, right? That's what they say. But the president, the former president, complained, openly about international influence in our election, yet didn't he send Democrat campaign staffers to Israel to unseat Benjamin Netanyahu?
Yeah, to say that he sent, maybe I don't want to say it's a stretch, but I can't tell you his team did work on the opposition campaign in Israel against the prime minister, and I can also tell you, having been in the same position myself as a political consultant or as a campaign consultant, when you're that close to the president, you don't do that without some level of approval. The ties are too strong to take that job without first going up some level of chain of command and asking for permission to do that. Whether it went all the way up to Obama or not, I don't know, but certainly people within his administration gave the nod to his own operatives to go work against the prime minister.
What are some of the behind the scenes in your estimation? Because, we still do support Israel militarily. Like you said, for many of the Democrats in Congress, it might be more of a victim and oppressor thing. They'd like to see more foreign aid to the Palestinians. What would you say are some of the behind the scenes or clandestine ways Barack Obama undermined Israel?
Well, to what we know clandestinely, certainly, can't be talked about on your radio show.
Okay.
But, one of the things that you see with President Trump, whether it's with getting out of TPP or NAFTA or anything else, or whatever, he believes in the idea of a bilateral negotiation, whether it's trade or with Russia or whatever it may be. The idea of a peace between the Palestinians and Israelis can only be forged between two groups, the Palestinians and the Israelis. And I think if you look at all the things, and even that weren't reported in the media, but things that the American administration did within the UN, and not just the abstention on that last UN Security Council vote, but within UNESCO and within other international organizations, that kind of gave credence to the Palestinians going around any sort of idea of a direct bilateral negotiation and trying to use international pressure and international courts and international organizations to force the hand of Israel tells you a lot about where Obama and the administration were in trying to force the hand of Israel into a bad deal and not allow the two parties to finally just come together and say, listen, it's only going to be the two of us that can do this. That's what a bilateral negotiation will yield. That's what will yield a two-state solution. Short of that, everything the Obama administration did undercut that signal to the Palestinians. In fact, it gave the Palestinians the boldness and the bravado to go to the international courts and the international communities and try and pressure Israel, as opposed to the opposite. And my feeling is that what Donald Trump will do as president will send a very strong signal to the Palestinians. If you really are serious about peace and you're serious about a two-state solution, there's only going to be one way. Sit down, cross the table from the Israelis, and talk. That's the only way to get it done.
Now, real quick, before we get into more specific on the change of administrations, we always hear the left in this country, portray Muslims as the victim, right? That Israel is the lone, or at least the most acknowledged nuclear power in the Middle East. Some part of me always thought that the Iranian nuke deal was to force Israel force them into a weaker position if there was an Islamic nuclear power, right next door. But how are Muslims treated? Because this is largely left out of when we see, Hollywood videos of Israeli soldiers versus Palestinian terrorists, that the Muslims that live in Israel as Israeli citizens live a pretty damn good life, don't they?
Well, all any of your listeners would have to do is Google Israeli Supreme Court, and they will see that an Israeli Arab sits on the Supreme Court. A Muslim Israeli Arab sits on the Supreme Court. That alone should end the argument. I mean, it's ridiculous to say that Israel oppresses the Muslim population. It does not. It gives them the full rights of citizenship, the right to vote, freedom of speech, freedom of press. It gives them health care. It gives them Social Security. It gives them everything every Israeli citizen has. And they serve in the police force. They serve in the court system as judges and as lawyers. There's an Israeli Supreme Court justice who's an Israeli Arab. The idea that there's any kind of apartheid state that exists within Israel is ridiculous. What Israel does do, and does it pretty damn well, is fight Islamic terrorism within its borders and outside of its borders, and tries to do everything it can to keep its citizens safe, which is the role of a government. And that's there's no questioning that Israel needs to do that and does it actively and aggressively. But the idea that there's some sort of apartheid situation existing in Israel is absolutely false. And again, I just encourage your viewers to go Google the Israeli Supreme Court and look at the names of the justices on the Israeli Supreme Court, and that should tell you everything you need to know about how Israel treats its Arab citizens.
All right, we're coming up on the top of the hour. We were going to break. Donald Trump is speaking now about the executive action that he signed on the Homeland Security, law enforcement, and border wall, except CNN now is covering the death of Mayor Tyler Moore, not the president speaking. Not a shock there. What do you think is going to be the biggest change that we see in our relationship with Israel against the last 8 years?
I think it'll be an unequivocal support for the right of Israel to exist as a Jewish state. It will, I think, have a huge impact on the way the United Nations treats Israel, both within the Security Council, within UNESCO, and within other international organizations. And I do think at the end it will send a signal, as I said earlier, to the Palestinians. You know, they're saying there's a new sheriff in town. Well, you know, the Middle East makes the Wild West look like a Buddhist monastery, and the fact that that Donald Trump will openly and forcefully let the Palestinians know that there is a new sheriff in town and that there's not going to be any playing of these games in the international courts and the international organizations, that the only way to peace is sitting across the table from the Israelis and having a bilateral negotiation, I think will yield the biggest change and the biggest hope for finally achieving some sort of peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. All
right, George Birnbaum, I gotta end it here. He's the former chief of staff to Benjamin Netanyahu. His website is gebinternational.com. He's the founder and CEO. George, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.